We have no lack of first-person shooters in virtual reality. The technology literally lends itself to these type of games perfectly, so developer Xreal have their work cut out for them with Zero Caliber 2, especially after the lackluster Gambit. Before it was fully released, it had a lot of potential, but ultimately it fell flat and left the community feeling somewhat ripped off, especially with the lack of updates and fixes. About a month ago I got early access to Zero Caliber 2 and came away very impressed. It was pretty polished for an early access title and the graphics looked very impressive for Quest, especially when there can be a lot going on screen all at once. So it's a bit of a surprise that so close to the early access version, the game is now being officially released but only on MetaQuest, with other platforms coming later on. Personally, I was quite a fan of the original Zero Caliber on PC back in the day because it was the only VR FPS I knew of which really focused on a single player campaign which can be enjoyed also in co-op to give you that Call of Duty style gameplay. Well, Zero Caliber 2 is aiming to nail that single-player Call of Duty experience again with this sequel, and to some low degree, I actually think they may have pulled it off. The campaign features 12 chapters, and to be clear, I've only played 7, and I reckon the playtime could be around 7 to 8 hours. It also features online co-op, so you could do the whole campaign again with a friend, multiplayer, and mod maps. But today's review is focused on the single-player campaign, since there is obviously no one online to play with currently. So let's dive into the positives. There's lots of intense street battles, house-to-house shootouts, explosions everywhere, a great variety of weapons that have weight with realistic recoil, forcing you to two-hand most of the guns, and they have a physical presence with a definitive punch, especially the shotgun which sends NPCs flying. Headshots are rewarded with a satisfying M1 grand-sounding ping and a thud. And there's also brilliant customization of all the weapons, where the player simply looks at the gun and you can easily remove and detach add-ons like grips, laser scopes, underbarrel grenade launchers and more. This was actually a real highlight for the game for me. Going around collecting parts from other weapons to make an all-out supreme assault rifle killing machine was great fun, and sticking a silencer along with a massive scope on a pistol was an absolute highlight. And also, while I'm on the subject of talking about scopes, using them are pretty good. I especially like pulling pins on grenades and smoke bombs and flashbangs with my teeth, which also combined with a really good throwing mechanic that feels right, which I find a lot of VR games struggle with. So far, so good. But now we get into some of the negative stuff. The level design is good but can feel samey, and some of the environments do get repetitive over time. I just want to touch on, when you go through some of these environments, some of them look excellent. One of the later levels, I actually kind of thought it looked a bit like a Killzone level. It looked very good. Enemy AI can be slow to react, but they are good shots, so you do have to use cover to avoid dying. While speaking of dying, the medical health pens are pretty pointless overall, since players' health completely regenerates after 5 seconds, but it can be good if you're fast enough to use them to keep running and gunning. Speaking of running, the sprint speed feels a little bit slower than I would have liked, and well, the next bit of information is a little bit of a cardinal sin. The foveated rendering when aiming down the red dot sight works in reverse. Meaning when you aim, you actually get a more pixelated image inside the sight when you would surely expect the best image when you're aiming down the sight. Now, I do expect this is a technical bug because, I mean, that simply doesn't make any sense. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen more often than I would like. There's also a little bit of jank. Enemies' guns in story moments were not facing in the right direction in some of the cutscenes. There's some unfinished graphics for some set pieces, and the large vehicles, like the large helicopters that fly overhead, and explosions can look a little bit dull and underwhelming. And the boss fights, such as using a rocket launcher to blow up a helicopter out of the sky, was pretty laughable. The explosion impact from the rocket makes zero difference to the helicopter's flight pattern, and it results in a frankly cheap feeling victory. There was a particularly humorous bit where there was a really good looking helicopter actually flying overhead which had an explosive barrel inside it for me to shoot. Put a fucking explosive barrel in the helicopter. Oh, that didn't look too good, did it? I don't think I'm ever going to forget that. There's plenty of moments like this throughout the game, unfortunately. Does it take away from the action though and the feeling? Yes, it does, a little, because in terms of overall presentation, we're now looking at a very mixed bag of different moments. And I would argue the first 2 chapters or the first 2 missions of the game are the most polished, and I think maybe that's why creators were only allowed to show at the beginning of the early access those 2 missions. The campaign story itself is pretty weak, and the secret codes you need to find to open the doors are always laying next to the door on some piece of paper, making me feel that a lot of this was an afterthought, which is a bit of a shame. I honestly believe the game has some good points, only to be let down by a lack of polish and, to be honest, a little bit of care. A few months of testing could have really benefited this game. Right now it's okay and it's got the groundwork for a really good game. But with all that being said, I definitely had fun. When you're in the zone picking up different weapons and making some crazy weapon combinations and laying waste to all the enemy, it can be really satisfying and it has something to offer. But if you're looking for a highly polished VR FPS, I'm really sad to say that until there's a lot of updates and I see an improvement, this isn't the game you're looking for. And if you do pick this up, the more you play it, you'll definitely see what I mean. Thank you ever so much for watching. Thank you for any likes and comments and anyone who subscribes, and I'll see you in the comment section.